The wind claws at the battlements. A candle flutters. Stone sweats in the winter air. Somewhere in the depths of a Welsh fortress, a girl cries out, and the cry ricochets from wall to wall like an iron nail struck on stone. The year is 1457. The night is long. In a chamber shut against the sea, men wait outside with wax-pale faces while women move within like shadows at a vigil. The girl on the bed is 13. She grips linen gone slick with blood. The midwives pray in Latin under their breath. The fire draws and falters. Smoke stings the eyes. On this night, a child will give England a king. She does not know that. She only knows the hurt that keeps returning in waves, and the taste of iron at the back of her throat. She was born Margaret Beaufort in late May of 1443. Small, watchful, the only legitimate child of John Beaufort, Duke of Somerset, and Margaret Beauchamp of Bletsoe. Her blood ran back to John of Gaunt and Catherine Swynford, a line both blessed and marked, legitimate, then limited, stamped with royal favor, then hedged by a later decree that said this house, though lawful, would never wear the crown. Printed on parchment, remembered in whispers, ignored when convenient. In England, a signature could shift like sand when the wind changed. Her father returned from France hollowed out by defeat. He had seen fortunes burned away, towns lost one after another, years that began in glory and ended in accounts of failure. In 1444, he died at Wimborne Minster. Some called it fever, others used a sharper word and then looked over their shoulders. Rumors travel faster than nights. Yet the truth that mattered was this. The infant Margaret was left with a title, estates, and a dangerous power. She was useful. A child does not choose the table where she is traded. Adults do that. Margaret became a ward. She became a bond. There was a contract to tie her to John de la Pole, the son of the Duke of Suffolk. It did what such contracts do. It stacked favors on one side of the scales. It did not last. Suffolk fell. The Channel took him. The ship rolled. His enemies sharpened their stories. The parchment was cancelled by a corpse, and the same small girl remained in play, waiting for a hand to pick her up and set her down again where it suited the moment. She married Edmund Tudor in 1455. She was 12. He was in his mid-20s. Edmund was the king's half-brother through Catherine of Valois and Owen Tudor. The match bound Lancastrian hopes closer and folded the Beaufort claim into Tudor ambition. It happened at once. Consent was a word used for ceremony. There was no pause for growth or safety. The wedding bed made a law of urgency. Later, in her house of prayer, she would speak softly to God for hours. Some called it piety. Some called it penance. Both might be true. Autumn came. War tightened its fist around Wales. Edmund led men and took risks. He was captured at Carmarthen, and by November of 1456 he was dead. Plague, they wrote. That word covered many sins. It covered neglect. It covered hunger in a locked cell. It covered the choice to let a prisoner fade without help. Whatever the cause, his wife now stood at the edge of winter pregnant and widowed, not yet 13, and faced into a storm. The sea lived at Pembroke. It battered the limestone cliffs until the rock itself seemed to groan. The castle's round keep rose like a drum against the sky. Thick walls, cold rooms, the kind of place that holds. Jasper Tudor, Edmund's brother, brought Margaret there. It was the surest place he had. A fortress where the sea would throw off most invaders, where the cry of gulls and the crash of waves could hide other sounds. He took responsibility for the girl because he had to. And because something in her unblinking will demanded it, she walked the battlements as far as she could walk. She learned to measure people with her eyes. She watched how men carried news, how they lied without blinking, how they told the truth by accident. A priest taught her that prayer is a fire that needs tending, and that action is the spark that catches. In the hours when no one saw, she held her belly and breathed against the ache. She was not built for this birth. Everybody understood it. Nobody said it aloud. The pains began in January. They came sharp and close, like the sea throwing one wave over another. The midwives worked with steady hands. They burned rosemary and tucked their hair back and recited the saints whose names their mothers had taught them. The doctor from Oxford came and went and came again, his face drawn into clean lines of worry. He had read the old books. He knew the cases that ended in blood and silence. His remedies were few. His words were plainer still. This will be hard. This may kill her. He spoke quietly to Jasper. He looked at the girl and saw both childhood and command in the same hollow-cheeked face. The night stretched. Margaret bit her lip until it bled. She prayed with a kind of focus that looked like fury. Hours ground past. The women tried everything they knew. They turned her. They coaxed the baby to shift. They gave her sips of wine. They pressed warm cloths on her hands and belly. When the time came, they used strength born of long work and pulled with care and desperate skill. A thin cry rose. It cut through the air like a blade drawn from a sheath. They held up a small, angry boy with a wild crown of dark, wet hair. They pressed him to his mother's chest for the count of a breath, and then took him to the hearth. Henry Tudor was born at Pembroke on the 28th day of January. The year marked him. The place carved him. His mother lived, barely. The damage ran deep and would not mend. She would not bear another child. She was 13 and had given all of herself to one life, and that life would demand the rest of her years. In the days after the birth, she drifted between fever and chill. She woke from dreams of drowning to find the rushes wet with sweat. The castle smelled of smoke, salt, and old wool. The priest left the chapel doors open so his prayers could move down the passage like smoke. Sometimes she could hold the baby. Sometimes memory cut through her like cold iron, and her arms trembled. The love was there. The fear was there too. Both could be true at once, and often were, in her house. Outside, the kingdom cracked. The first battle at St. Albans had already shown how quickly a street could turn into a graveyard. Houses of York and Lancaster met in narrow ways and exchanged the future for blood. The court became a place where eyes counted loyalties more than words did. News arrived like arrows. It stuck. It hurt. It changed plans. Men who laughed together in the morning hunted each other by nightfall. Margaret married again in 1458, Sir Henry Stafford, of the House of Buckingham. A quieter union, a careful one, safety first. The deal was plain. She kept the Beaufort estates. He guarded them. She prayed and learned and moved very slowly across a chessboard most people could not even see. He leaned York, but was no fanatic. He liked his lands. He liked his bones unbroken. She did not ask him for a war. She asked him for time. He gave it, and for years that was enough. In March 1461, the snow in Yorkshire was tramped red at Towton, Palm Sunday. Wind that blinded. Men who could not hear for the roar. A battle so absolute that the country itself seemed to stagger. When the storm cleared, Edward of York stood as King Edward IV. The Lancastrian cause fell back, battered and unsteady. A mad king flickered in and out of himself. A queen fought like a general. Exile waited in the wings. Margaret understood what this meant for a tiny boy in Wales whose blood was a problem. She built a net of information because not knowing would kill him. She bribed churchmen and sailors, stewards and cooks. She read letters by candlelight and then burned them to ash. She saw her son rarely. Rules, distance, fear. She made a discipline of it. He grew into long limbs and wary eyes under Jasper's charge. He rode in rain. He listened more than he spoke. He learned to survive among men who could not afford to like him too much. In letters, his mother traced the slope of his face in words. In gifts, she sent him the feel of home. Cloth warm enough for Welsh winters. A book with a prayer she had read so many times the page's edge grew soft under her thumb. He was hers. He was gone. Both were true. War never sat still. It turned. In 1469, Sir Henry Stafford limped home wounded and angry. He had given good service and felt paid in smoke. Margaret did not press. She asked questions. She listened. She measured the hurt and let it do its own work. By 1470, the kingmaker had shifted his weight. Old enemies embraced long enough to draw blades side by side. Henry VI stepped out of the tower into a world that no longer knew him. He blinked at the light. Men cheered because that is what men do when the wind turns. It was brief. In 1471, Edward came back across the water like a thrown spear. Barnet broke Warwick. Tewkesbury finished the Lancastrian line. The prince lay dead. The king would soon be smothered by shadows. What remained of Lancaster was a handful of names on a blunt list, a boy in Wales with a claim written in fine print. He was dangerous because he was possible. Possibility gets people killed. Jasper moved fast. Tenby, a ship, a sudden night. Henry not yet 15 and already old in the eyes. The channel heaved black under a hard sky. Brittany took them in, not as home, as leverage. A duke who balanced England on one hand and France on the other held the boy like a coin to be spent later. Exile taught patience. It taught the art of waiting without rusting. It taught how to use silence as a tool. News crossed the water slowly, as if each word had to learn to swim. Margaret's husband died the year her son fled. Wounds, weariness. The times themselves could break a man with no need for poison. She stood at a window and watched a pale dusk gather. Then she turned and began again. She made a plan, then another. She chose a third marriage not for comfort, but for reach. Thomas Stanley, a man whose loyalties bent like reed but never snapped. He had men. He had ears in every hall. He had the habit of survival. She had purpose. Between them they could move the ground under a king's feet. Whispers spread that she was ruthless without limit, that she could smile at a man and see through his skin, that her prayers were negotiations with heaven that always ended in her favor. This was only palace gossip. It made a woman's will sound like witchcraft so men could sleep at night. What cannot be doubted is simpler. Margaret learned the uses of patience, secrecy, and kinship. She sent small, harmless notes that hid the real ones. She met in kitchens as often as in chambers. She asked for little, then a little more, until the ask did not feel like a step at all. Edward IV died in April 1483, not old, not young, worn out by pleasures that do not forgive. He left a boy king in a court that smelled of panic. Richard of Gloucester moved with a swordsman's economy. He took the nephews into the Tower, found a pretext to name them illegitimate, and crowned himself. The city watched and said nothing out loud. The air in London grew heavy with the question no one wanted to ask. What had become of the boys? Richard's claim looked strong on paper. In the streets, it leaked strength by the day. Margaret felt the opening like a change in weather. She reached for John Morton and for other men who could carry plans in their heads without letting them spill. She tied a knot no one expected. Her exiled son would marry Elizabeth of York, Edward's daughter. Red and white would meet at the altar, and England would be forced to breathe. Not all rumor helps a cause. Some said Margaret planned every breath in the city. Some said she crept through the Tower in a nun's habit. Many believe these are myths. The true record shows months of letters. Money moved quietly, and pledges gathered like dry kindling in a careful pile. When a rising cracked in 1483, it came too soon. The weather turned. The fleet scattered. Men died on gibbets because gibbets are what a frightened regime uses to talk to its people. Richard spared Margaret's life because Stanley stood between her and the axe. House arrest followed. She bowed her head. She did not stop working. Years teach a woman the faces men wear to battle. She saw them all in August of 1485 when sails showed off Milford Haven and Henry came back to the land that had made him. He moved inland with steadiness, gathering the wary and the hopeful. Richard marched to meet him with banners and a hard jaw. Stanley watched from the edge with his forces fresh and still. He had a wife who had waited half her life for this hour. He had a king who could hang him before noon if he chose. He measured the field and chose survival, as he always had. But that day survival and Margaret's will were the same thing. Bosworth was fought on wet ground under a sky the color of lead. Trumpets, hooves, the thunder of men colliding. Richard pushed for Henry in a last clean stroke of courage that would ring down the centuries. It was not enough. The Stanleys moved. Swords came from the side. The king went down in the mud. The crown was found in a hawthorn bush. They set it on Henry's head while the smoke still stung. The air changed. A long war groaned and turned to ash. England exhaled and waited to see what would replace fear. Henry VII married Elizabeth of York and made good on the promise that had been whispered in the dark corridors. Red and white, Lancaster and York. Unity as a law and a symbol. It was not peace at once. Pretenders rose. Plots flowered and died. But the center held. The coinage changed. The courts learned to do as they were told. A new house wrote its name on the front of the age. Margaret went on as she had always gone on. Quietly, with discipline. She founded and endowed, praying with her hands as well as her tongue. She made colleges where thought could be sharpened and saved. She managed estates like a general movesman, with attention to supply and timing. She wore red for Beaufort and black for mourning, and carried herself like a woman who understood cost. She advised when allowed, and when not allowed, she found other ways to be heard. She signed herself Margaret R., not for Regina, but for Richmond. Titles can be prayers too. Whispers said she ruled her son, that she kept his queen small and still, that she carried the keys to his mind. Yet many of these tales are the work of those who cannot abide a woman who endures. In reality, Henry made his own reckonings. He could be tender and cold in the same hour. He was a king who loved profit and order and sleep without fear. His mother helped him build the world in which such sleep was possible. The old king died in April of 1509. The bells told the city before anyone spoke. His son, the bright young Henry, who would become something else altogether, was crowned in June. Margaret lived long enough to see that day. Days only. She died at the end of that month. They buried her in Westminster under black marble and carved calm. The inscription does what inscriptions do. It names. It praises. It leaves out the sound of a midwife's breath at midnight and the feel of frost inside a castle window and the taste of salt on lips that cracked in prayer. What remains is the straight line that runs from that child's bed in Pembroke to the hawthorn at Bosworth and the sealed writs of a ruling house. It runs through letters written by firelight and risks taken with quiet hands. It runs through a woman who learned to take pain and hammer it into purpose. Kings end wars, the songs insist. Sometimes a mother ends them by refusing to stop. She was not a saint. She did not need to be a monster to do what she did. She was a person who knew how to outlast storms and how to make allies of men who only believed in themselves. She read the dark and moved accordingly. She knew the price of creation. She paid it and then paid again. The girl who survived a birth meant to break her became the architect of a dynasty. The sea kept crashing at Pembroke long after the torches went out. The wind kept worrying the stones. But on some nights, if you listen between gusts and gulls, you can almost hear a single thin cry, new and fierce, and the quieter, steadier breath of a mother who will not let the world take her child.